The summer heat was relentless in Oak Ridge, a quiet suburban neighborhood where Michael Donovan had lived for nearly 15 years. As the June sun beat down mercilessly on his modest single-story home, Michael stood in his backyard, hands on his hips, staring at the above-ground swimming pool that had become more of a burden than a joy. The once pristine blue liner was now faded and patched in multiple places, and the metal frame showed worrying signs of rust despite his diligent maintenance. "It's time," he muttered to himself, wiping sweat from his brow. At 42, Michael had grown tired of the constant upkeep. His children, now teenagers, barely used the pool anymore, preferring to spend their summer days at the community center or with friends. The pool had become nothing more than an expensive ornament, consuming both his weekends and his wallet. What Michael didn't realize as he made his decision was that his seemingly simple choice would soon entangle him in a neighborhood drama of epic proportions, one that would test his patience, challenge his rights as a homeowner, and introduce him to the irrational wrath of Patricia Winters, the notorious Karen of Oak Ridge Avenue. Patricia lived in the two-story colonial across the fence from Michael. Her house was immaculate, her garden meticulously maintained, and her opinion of herself impossibly high. Patricia had moved to the neighborhood 5 years ago following a divorce and had quickly established herself as the self-appointed arbiter of all neighborhood matters, whether anyone had asked for her input or not. That fateful Saturday morning, Michael had risen early, determined to begin the process of dismantling the pool. He had spent the previous evening researching how to properly drain and dismantle it, and had even rented a small pump to help with the drainage. His plan was simple: spend the weekend taking down the pool, post the metal frame for sale online, and reclaim his backyard for a new patio project he'd been contemplating. "Dad, are you sure about this?" his daughter Emma asked, watching from the kitchen window as Michael connected the pump's hose to the pool. "Positive," Michael replied. "This thing costs more to maintain than it's worth. Besides, I thought you might appreciate having a nice patio space for when your friends come over." Emma shrugged. "I guess, just don't hurt yourself out there, okay?" Michael laughed. "I think I can handle taking down a pool I put up myself, but thanks for the concern." As the pump began its work, drawing water from the pool and directing it toward the side drainage ditch as city regulations permitted, Michael felt a sense of accomplishment. The pool had served its purpose during the years when his children were younger, providing countless hours of summer entertainment. Now it was time for something new, something that better suited their current lifestyle. He was about halfway through draining the pool when he noticed a shadow fall across the water. Looking up, he found Patricia peering over the fence, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her expression a mixture of disapproval and alarm. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut through the pleasant morning air. Michael straightened up, trying to maintain his good mood. "Good morning, Patricia. Just removing the old pool. It's seen better days." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "You can't do that." Michael blinked, momentarily confused. "I'm sorry." "You can't remove that pool?" Patricia repeated, enunciating each word as if Michael might have trouble understanding basic English. "It's against the neighborhood guidelines." "What neighborhood guidelines?" Michael asked, genuinely perplexed. Oak Ridge was an older development with a minimal HOA presence. The few rules that did exist pertained mainly to trash collection and noise ordinances. The aesthetic continuity guidelines, Patricia responded with an air of authority that Michael found both baffling and irritating. "That pool has been part of the neighborhood's summer character since you installed it. Removing it will affect property values." Michael couldn't help but laugh, which only seemed to infuriate Patricia further. "Patricia, it's my pool on my property. And trust me, this rusting metal frame isn't adding to anybody's property value." "We'll see about that," Patricia snapped, pulling her cell phone from her pocket. Some people have no consideration for their neighbors or community standards. As Patricia stalked away, Michael shook his head and returned to his work, dismissing the encounter as just another example of Patricia's peculiar personality. Little did he know that the confrontation was only the beginning, and that within hours, his simple home improvement project would bring squad cars to his driveway and make him the reluctant main character in a neighborhood drama that would soon have the entire community talking. Michael continued draining the pool, dismissing Patricia's threats as nothing more than the empty posture he'd grown accustomed to over the years. The water level slowly receded as the afternoon progressed, and his teenage son Jake had even emerged from his typical weekend hibernation to help with the project. "So you really ticked off the Wicked Witch of Oak Ridge Avenue, huh?" Jake asked, helping Michael coil excess hose. "Let's not call her that," Michael said, though he couldn't help the small smile that crept onto his face. "But yes, apparently removing our own pool is some kind of neighborhood crime." "She's so weird," Jake muttered. "Remember when she measured our grass with a ruler last summer and left that passive-aggressive note about optimal lawn height?" Michael chuckled. "Or when she reported the Hendersons for having a bird feeder that was, and I quote, attracting an undesirable element of wildlife to our pristine community." They shared a laugh, unaware that Patricia was methodically escalating her campaign against the pool removal. From her home office window, she had perfect surveillance of Michael's backyard. She already made 3 calls, one to the non-existent HOA she frequently pretended existed, another to the city's code enforcement office, which was closed for the weekend, and finally her small but dedicated circle of neighborhood allies who shared her passion for imposing arbitrary rules on others. By mid-afternoon, the pool was nearly drained. Michael and Jake had begun dismantling the metal frame when a sleek silver SUV pulled into the driveway. Out stepped Regina Conway, Patricia's closest ally in the neighborhood and the treasurer of the garden club they had founded together. "Michael," Regina called, striding toward the backyard gate with purpose, clipboard in hand. "I need a word with you." Michael sighed, setting down his wrench. "Hello, Regina. What can I do for you?" Regina adjusted her designer sunglasses and glanced disparagingly at the half-dismantled pool. "Patricia informed me about your project. I'm here representing the Neighborhood Preservation Committee." Jake snorted, quickly turning it into an unconvincing cough when Michael shot him a warning glance. "What committee?" Michael asked. "Regina, I've lived here for 15 years and I've never heard of this committee." "We're newly formed," Regina replied smoothly, "and very concerned about preserving the character of Oak Ridge. Your pool has been a neighborhood fixture for years. Children look forward to seeing it filled every summer. It's practically a landmark." Michael blinked in disbelief. "It's a Walmart above-ground pool that's rusting in multiple places, and my kids don't even use it anymore. What other neighborhood children are supposedly enjoying the view of my pool from behind a privacy fence?" Regina's lips thinned to a disapproving line. "This isn't just about you, Michael. It's about community standards. Patricia has noted that your pool is visible from her second-story window and contributes to the summer ambience of the neighborhood." "You mean Patricia likes to look into my backyard from her window?" Michael clarified, his patience wearing thin. "That seems like her problem, not a me problem." Regina's nostrils flared. "We're asking you to reconsider. At minimum, this requires a formal application to the committee for approval. An application to remove my own pool from my own property to a committee that doesn't officially exist," Michael said slowly, making sure he understood the absurdity of the situation. "I'll leave this with you," Regina said, thrusting the clipboard toward him. On it was a homemade form with application for external property modification, written in elaborate calligraphy at the top. "The committee meets next Thursday. We request 24 copies for review." Michael didn't take the clipboard. "Regina, I appreciate your dedication, but I'm removing this pool today. It's my property, there's no HOA here, and there's absolutely no legal requirement for me to get permission from a self-appointed committee." Regina's face flushed. "This is exactly the kind of unneighborly attitude that's bringing down property values. Patricia warned me you'd be difficult." "I'm not being difficult. I'm being reasonable," Michael countered. "Now, if you don't mind, we've got work to finish before dinner." Regina departed in a huff, clipboard clutched to her chest, already dialing Patricia to report her failure. Michael and Jake returned to their work, both assuming this would be the end of the matter. They were wrong. Just after 5 o'clock, as they were removing the last of the metal frame sections, the distinctive sound of sirens cut through the peaceful neighborhood. Michael and Jake exchanged confused glances, stepping around to the front yard just in time to see 2 police cruisers pull up in front of their house, lights flashing. Standing at the end of the driveway, arms crossed in triumph, was Patricia. Behind her were Regina and 2 other neighbors Michael recognized from Patricia's garden club. The small crowd of onlookers from surrounding homes was growing by the second. "Sir, we received a call about illegal activity on this property," said the first officer, a young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Something about unauthorized construction and water dumping?" Michael stared in disbelief, first at the officer, then at Patricia's smug expression, as the reality of the situation dawned on him. She had actually called the police over a pool, his pool. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered, running a hand through his hair as neighbors began to gather on the sidewalk, drawn by the commotion of police lights and the promise of suburban drama. What should have been a simple weekend project had somehow turned into a public spectacle, and Michael found himself at the center of a ridiculous neighborhood showdown that was only just beginning. Michael took a deep breath and approached the officers, acutely aware of the growing audience of neighbors. His son Jake hung back, phone in hand, clearly texting furiously, no doubt ensuring the entire teenage population of Oak Ridge would soon know about the unfolding drama. "Officers," Michael began calmly, "I'm Michael Donovan. This is my property, and I'm simply removing an old above-ground pool that I installed myself about 8 years ago." The older of the 2 police officers, whose nameplate read Officer Ramirez, glanced back at Patricia and her posse, then at the partially dismantled pool visible in the backyard. His expression suggested this wasn't the first neighborhood dispute he'd been needlessly dragged into. Sir, we received a call about illegal water dumping and destruction of property that impacts the neighborhood's aesthetic value. Officer Ramirez explained, though his tone conveyed he was simply going through the motions. The caller also mentioned possible violations of HOA regulations and city ordinances. Patricia stepped forward before Michael could respond. That's correct, officer. Mr. Donovan here is in direct violation of community standards. That pool has been a fixture of this neighborhood for years. Removing it without proper approval is simply unacceptable. I wasn't aware I needed approval to remove something I purchased and installed myself, Michael replied, struggling to keep the frustration from his voice. And for the record, I properly drained the pool water into the side drainage ditch, which is completely within city guidelines for pool drainage. The younger officer, whose name I read Officer Chen, seemed to be stifling a smile. Ma'am, he addressed Patricia, is there an official homeowners association in this neighborhood? Patricia straightened her posture. We have the Oak Ridge Neighborhood Preservation Committee, which I chair. We oversee all external property modifications to maintain our community standards. Officer Chen raised an eyebrow. Is this committee officially registered with the city? Does it have legal authority to enforce regulations? Well, not yet, technically, Patricia admitted, her confidence wavering slightly. We're in the process of formalizing our status, but we do have the support of many concerned residents. She gestured to Regina and the two other neighbors behind her, who nodded vigorously. By now, Michael's next-door neighbor, Frank Henderson, had wandered over, coffee mug in hand. Officers, Frank interjected, I've lived in this neighborhood for 20 years and I can tell you there is no HOA here. Never has been. Patricia's committee is just her and a few friends who like to tell everyone else what to do with their property. Patricia gasped indignantly. That is simply not true. We are concerned citizens protecting our neighborhood's character and property values. Officer Ramirez rubbed his forehead, clearly developing a headache. Mr. Donovan, do you have documentation showing ownership of the pool? It's a Walmart pool I bought and installed myself, Michael explained. But yes, I probably have the original receipt somewhere if that's really necessary. More importantly, it's on my property, which I do have documentation for. He pulled out his wallet and extracted his driver's license, showing his address. And regarding the water drainage, Michael continued, I've followed all city protocols. I drained it slowly to prevent flooding, directed it to the proper drainage ditch, and made sure no water is going onto anyone else's property. Officer Ramirez nodded, seemingly satisfied. He turned to Patricia. Ma'am, based on what I'm seeing, there's no violation of any law or ordinance here. Mr. Donovan is within his rights to remove a structure from his own property, especially without an official HOA in place. Patricia's face flushed crimson. But what about the neighborhood aesthetics? What about my view? I can see that eyesore from my office window. Your view? Michael repeated incredulously. You called the police because I'm affecting your view into my backyard. A view you shouldn't even be concerned with. The gathering of neighbors had grown and a few chuckles could be heard at Patricia's admission. Even Regina looked uncomfortable now. It's not just about the view, Patricia backpedaled, sensing she was losing her audience. It's about what this says about our neighborhood. First, he removes a perfectly good pool, and next thing you know, people will be painting their houses unusual colors, or, she lowered her voice dramatically, installing lawn ornaments without approval. Officer Chen couldn't contain a small laugh, which he quickly disguised as a cough. Ma'am, unless there's an official HOA with recorded covenants, people are generally allowed to paint their houses and install lawn ornaments as they wish, as long as they comply with city codes. Which, for the record, I always do, Michael added. Frank raised his coffee mug in agreement. Michael's one of the most responsible homeowners on the block. His yard's always well maintained. More neighbors nodded in support, and Patricia's triumphant expression had completely dissolved into one of growing horror as she realized her complaint was backfiring spectacularly. Well, I never, she huffed. If this is how our community responds to someone trying to maintain standards, perhaps I should reconsider my dedication to this neighborhood. Perhaps you should, agreed Mrs. Abernathy, an elderly woman who had lived across the street for decades. Some of us quite like the idea of folks being able to do as they please with their own property, dearie. Officer Ramirez closed his notepad. Mr. Donovan, you're free to continue with your project. There's no violation here. He turned to Patricia. Ma'am, I'd advise against making further calls to the police about non-emergency matters. False reports can result in citations. As the officers prepared to leave, Emma emerged from the house with a tray of lemonade. I thought everyone might be thirsty, she said, offering glasses to the officers, her father, and the neighbors who had gathered. That's very thoughtful, young lady, Officer Ramirez said with a smile, accepting a glass. Patricia watched in disbelief as what she had intended as a public shaming of Michael transformed into an impromptu neighborhood gathering with people chatting amiably, several offering Michael help with removing the rest of the pool, and a few even complimenting his plans for a new patio space. "This isn't over," Patricia hissed as she stalked past Michael toward her house. "The committee will be discussing this incident at our next meeting." Michael simply smiled and raised his lemonade glass to her retreating figure. "Have a nice evening, Patricia," he called cheerfully, earning another round of chuckles from the neighbors. As the police cruisers pulled away and the neighbors mingled in his front yard, Michael couldn't help but feel that his simple pool removal project had inadvertently accomplished something unexpected. It had united the neighborhood against Patricia's self-appointed authority and perhaps, just perhaps, made Oak Ridge Avenue a little bit friendlier in the process. But as he caught sight of Patricia watching from her upstairs window, phone pressed to her ear, he knew the saga of the pool removal was far from over. Whatever Patricia was planning next, Michael had a feeling it would be even more outlandish than calling the police. The next morning dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for Michael to finish what had become the most notorious pool removal in Oak Ridge history. After the previous day's spectacle, several neighbors had offered to help, and by 9 a.m., Frank from next door had arrived with coffee and donuts, followed shortly by the Johnsons from across the street and their teenage son, who was friends with Jake. "Quite the neighborhood event you've created here, Mike," Frank chuckled, handing him a coffee. "Patricia's pool liberation movement." Michael shook his head, smiling. "Not exactly how I plan to spend my weekend, but I'll take the help." With the additional hands, the remaining pool parts were quickly disassembled and sorted, the metal frame sections stacked neatly by the garage for Michael to list online later, the worn liner folded and ready for proper disposal. The conversation flowed easily among the neighbors, many of whom, despite living in proximity for years, had rarely interacted beyond casual waves and holiday greetings. "You know," said Linda Johnson as she helped roll up the pool liner in a weird way, "we should thank Patricia. I've lived here for 6 years and never knew half the people on this block until yesterday's police drama brought everyone out." "Speaking of Patricia," Frank lowered his voice, nodding toward the street, "incoming at 2 o'clock and she's not alone." Michael turned to see Patricia marching up his driveway, clipboard in hand. Behind her trailed a thin, balding man in an ill-fitting suit carrying a briefcase, looking distinctly uncomfortable in the morning heat. "Mr. Donovan," Patricia called out, her voice carrying that false sweetness that immediately put Michael on edge. "I hope you've reconsidered your destructive actions after yesterday's intervention." Michael straightened up, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Good morning, Patricia. As you can see, the pool is almost completely removed. The intervention didn't change anything because I wasn't doing anything wrong." Patricia's smile tightened. "Well, that's where you're mistaken. Allow me to introduce Mr. Harrington. He's a legal advisor who specializes in property disputes and neighborhood covenants." The man stepped forward, awkwardly shifting his briefcase. "Harold Harrington," he mumbled, not quite meeting Michael's eyes. "Ms. Winters has retained my services to address this matter." "You hired a lawyer?" Michael asked incredulously. "For pool removal? Not just any lawyer," Patricia corrected, "but one who understands the complexities of implied neighborhood covenants and visual easements." Frank snorted into his coffee, earning a glare from Patricia. Mr. Harrington cleared his throat. "Ms. Winters has informed me that your swimming pool has been in the same location for approximately 8 years, establishing a visual precedent that neighbors have come to rely upon. Additionally, she believes she may have claim to a visual easement due to the pool's prominence in her view." "A visual easement?" Michael repeated, bewildered. "That's not a real thing." "Furthermore," Mr. Harrington continued, ignoring Michael's comment, "Ms. Winters asserts that the presence of your pool has been factored into her property valuation, and its removal constitutes a material change that could negatively impact her home's appraised value." The neighbors had gathered closer now, watching the exchange with a mixture of disbelief and amusement. "Mr. Harrington," Michael said, trying to remain patient, "I appreciate that you're doing your job, but surely you know these claims have no legal basis. There's no such thing as a visual easement that would prevent me from changing my own backyard, and Patricia has no right to dictate what I do with my property based on what she can see from her window." Mr. Harrington shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. "Well, there are some cases in certain jurisdictions where—" "Harold," interrupted Mrs. Abernathy, who had appeared with a plate of homemade cookies for the work crew. "I couldn't help but overhear. Aren't you Dorothy Harrington's boy? From over on Maple Street?" The lawyer's face reddened. "Yes, ma'am." "I thought so. I played bridge with your mother for 20 years, Mrs. Abernathy continued cheerfully. "She'd be so disappointed to see you here trying to intimidate a good neighbor with such nonsense. Visual easement, indeed." Mr. Harrington's professional demeanor crumbled further. "Ms. Winters was quite insistent that there were grounds for a case," he mumbled defensively. "Patricia has been quite insistent about a lot of things," Frank commented dryly. Remember when she tried to fine the Garcias for having a birthday party that went 15 minutes past her arbitrary neighborhood quiet hours? Or when she measured the height of everyone's holiday decorations with a laser level, added Linda Johnson. Patricia's face had turned a dangerous shade of red. These are all legitimate neighborhood concerns that no one but me seems willing to address. Property values affect us all, and someone needs to maintain standards. Mr. Harrington, now looking like he wanted nothing more than to disappear, whispered something to Patricia, who responded with a harsh whisper of her own. Is there actually any legal document I need to be concerned about? Michael asked directly. Mr. Harrington sighed, his professional ethics apparently winning out over Patricia's fee. No formal legal complaint has been filed at this time. Ms. Winters asked me to assess the situation and perhaps present some persuasive legal language. Intimidation, you mean? Frank muttered. Harold, Patricia snapped. This is not what we discussed. I cannot in good conscience pursue legal action that has no basis in law, Ms. Winters, Mr. Harrington replied, finally finding his backbone. As I tried to explain in my office before you insisted we come here, there is no legal concept of a visual easement that would apply in this situation, and without a formal HOA with registered covenants, there's simply no case. Patricia snatched her clipboard back from him. I'm beginning to think you're not the right attorney for this matter. Perhaps I need someone with more creative thinking and dedication to neighborhood preservation. What you need, Michael suggested gently, is to accept that your neighbors are allowed to make changes to their own property even if you don't personally approve of those changes. This discussion isn't over, Patricia declared, but there was a note of desperation in her voice now. The Neighborhood Preservation Committee will be convening an emergency session this afternoon. I'd like to remind you, Michael said, that your committee has no legal authority. We'll see about that, Patricia replied ominously, before turning on her heel and marching back toward her house, leaving Mr. Harrington standing awkwardly behind. I apologize for the intrusion, the lawyer said quietly. Good day to you all. He nodded politely to Mrs. Abernathy. Please give my regards to your bridge club, ma'am. As Mr. Harrington retreated down the driveway, the neighbors burst into laughter. A visual easement, Frank wheezed. That's a new one. I can't believe she actually hired a lawyer, Michael said, shaking his head in disbelief. Don't worry, Mrs. Abernathy assured him, patting his arm. Harold was always a good boy. Too honest for his own good. He won't be filing anything on her behalf. The work crew returned to their tasks, spirits high after the entertaining interlude. By noon, the last traces of the pool had been removed, and Michael was beginning to sketch out plans for the patio that would replace it. Yet even as the neighborhood solidarity grew stronger around him, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that Patricia was far from done. Her parting words had carried an ominous tone that suggested she still had something up her sleeve, something potentially more dramatic than police or lawyers. Monday morning arrived, and Michael was relieved to return to the normalcy of his office job after the weekend's neighborhood drama. The pool was gone, the space cleared, and he'd already ordered materials for the new patio. With any luck, a Patricia situation would blow over and life in Oak Ridge would return to its usual peaceful rhythm. That hope evaporated the moment Michael pulled into his driveway that evening and saw the large white van parked in front of Patricia's house. Bold blue lettering on its side read, KCT 6 Action and Yonoduas. You have got to be kidding me, Michael muttered, gripping his steering wheel tightly. He hadn't even turned off his engine when a woman with a microphone, followed by a cameraman, approached his car. Mr. Donovan, Allison Reynolds from KCT 6 News. We'd like to talk to you about the neighborhood dispute that's been developing over your recent home renovation project. Michael reluctantly rolled down his window. There's no dispute. I removed an old pool from my backyard. That's it. Allison Reynolds' expression was one of practiced concern. That's not how it's been characterized to us, sir. We receive a tip about a serious neighborhood conflict involving property rights, potential environmental violations, and community standards. We're doing a special segment on neighborhoods in crisis. Michael closed his eyes briefly, silently counting to 10. When he opened them, he spotted Patricia standing on her front porch, watching with obvious satisfaction. Ms. Reynolds, Michael said carefully, I think you've been misled. There's no crisis here, just a neighbor who seems unhappy that I'm making changes to my own property. So you deny your actions have created division in the community? The reporter pressed as the cameraman moved to get a better angle. Before Michael could respond, Frank appeared from his yard next door. Hey, Mike. Oh, what's going on? Are you famous now? He eyed the news crew with amusement. Apparently my pool removal has become breaking news, Michael replied dryly. Sir, are you a neighbor? How do you feel about the community conflict that's been brewing? Allison Reynolds swiveled toward Frank, microphone extended. Frank laughed. Community conflict? Lady, only conflict is that Patricia over there, he pointed to Patricia, who quickly retreated inside her doorway. thinks she should control what everyone else does with their own property. Mike here removed an old pool. End of story. The reporter seemed disappointed by this straightforward account. But we received reports of police involvement, legal threats, and neighborhood division. Oh, there was police involvement, all right, Frank confirmed. Patricia called them for no good reason, and they left as soon as they realized it was a waste of their time. And yeah, she brought some poor lawyer around too, who basically told her she had no case. As for neighborhood division, well, the only division is between Patricia and everyone else who thinks she should mind her own business. Allison Reynolds' enthusiasm visibly dimmed, but she pressed on. We were informed that there are environmental concerns regarding improper water disposal. That's absolutely false, Michael stated firmly. I followed all city guidelines for pool drainage. You're welcome to contact the city's environmental department to confirm that. By now, other neighbors had noticed the news ran and were gathering. Mrs. Abernathy approached, leaning on her cane. Are you folk here about Patricia's pool tantrum? Goodness, she really has gone too far this time. Ma'am, you're a resident of the neighborhood. How do you feel about the changes being made that affect the community's character? Allison asked. Young lady, I've lived in this neighborhood for 43 years, and the only thing affecting our character is Patricia's constant meddling, Mrs. Abernathy replied sharply. Michael is one of the best neighbors on this street. That pool was his to remove, and if anything, the new patio he's planning will look much nicer. The cameraman lowered his equipment, whispering something to Allison. She nodded, looking increasingly frustrated. It seems there might have been some mischaracterization in the information we received, she admitted reluctantly. You think? Michael couldn't help but reply. Just then, the Garcias from down the street joined the growing crowd. What's happening? Is this about Patricia calling the TV station? Mr. Garcia asked. We got her email blast this morning asking everyone to stand united against destructive property modifications or something like that. Email blast, Michael repeated, incredulous. How many people did she send that to? The entire neighborhood listserv, Mrs. Garcia explained, but most people just ignored it. Patricia's always sending out dramatic announcements about something or other. The reporter, seeing her story crumbling before her eyes, made one last attempt. Would anyone here like to comment on how this dispute has affected the neighborhood? Well, Frank said thoughtfully, I've met more of my neighbors in the past 3 days than I had in the past 3 years, so I guess we should thank Patricia for that. Nothing brings people together like shared annoyance. This drew laughter from the assembled neighbors, and even Michael had to smile. So let me get this straight, Allison summarized, clearly disappointed. One resident is upset about another resident removing his own pool, called the police who determined no laws were broken, brought in a lawyer who confirmed there was no legal issue, and then contacted our station to report it as a major neighborhood crisis. That pretty much sums it up, Michael confirmed. Although you're forgetting the part where she invented a fake homeowners association and tried to make everyone believe they needed her permission to modify their own property, added Linda Johnson, who had joined the gathering. That was a creative touch. The reporter sighed and signaled to the cameraman to pack up. I don't think this is quite the neighborhood crisis story we were led to believe. As the news crew began to retreat toward their van, the front door of Patricia's house flew open. Having watched her media ambush disintegrate, she could apparently contain herself no longer. This is outrageous, she shouted, storming down her front walk. You're all undermining the very fabric of this community. That pool was a landmark, a cornerstone of our neighborhood identity. The cameraman, sensing more interesting footage, quickly raised his camera again. Patricia, Michael said calmly, it was just a pool. My pool, and it was falling apart. It wasn't just a pool, Patricia insisted, her voice rising dramatically. It was a gathering place, a symbol of community, the focal point of my meditation practice. A confused silence fell over the group. I'm sorry. What? Michael finally asked. Patricia seemed to realize she'd said more than intended but pressed on nonetheless. Every morning for the past 5 years, I've looked out my office window at that pool during my meditation sessions. The blue water of the perfect circle, it was an essential part of my spiritual well-being. Now it's gone and my chakras are completely misaligned. The cameraman was now filming eagerly, while Allison Reynolds looked like she'd just received an unexpected gift. Let me get this straight, Frank said slowly. You've been calling the police, threatening legal action, and contacting the news because you like to look at Mike's pool while you meditated. It's not just about meditation, Patricia insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. It's about property values and neighborhood aesthetics and community standards, and she trailed off, seeing the expressions on everyone's faces. And your chakras, Mrs. Abernathy supplied helpfully. Don't forget those. Patricia's face flushed crimson. You're all impossible. None of you appreciate what I do for this neighborhood. With that, she turned and stalked back to her house, slamming the door behind her. There was a moment of stunned silence before the neighbors burst into laughter. Well, said Allison Reynolds, suddenly animated again. It seems we